So just as a brief introduction, this is the next in the series with Paul, discussions with Paul Regan, a great friend of mine. And we're talking about humanity primarily. And I suggested we might talk about the top 5 most stupid things. So Paul, great to see you up in Liverpool, in a fantastic city that
thanks, buddy.
Talks straightforward, non-nonsense speak. So over to you, my friend. What do you think of the 5 most stupid things that we're on?
Well, we were actually having that chat about sort of like, no nonsense talking, and we were just talking about the fact that Liverpool, by contrast to somewhere like London, just does feel really grounded.
Yeah.
The contemporary levels of woke idiocy don't seem to have permeated to this place next. So when you suggested that topic, I was like, okay, like you suggested 5 things. It really didn't take me long to come with what those 5 things were. And I think we said gender, transcendence, communism, morality, and addiction. And so here's the thing, to put this in context, as a recovered cocaine addict who's been clean for 11 years, praise God, good sponsorship and the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, I have had a long history doubting the quality of my mental health, right? And so I find it incredibly ironic that over the last, certainly over the last 5 years, but most importantly over the last 3 years, compared to the rest of the world, particularly as it's reflected in contemporary culture,
yeah.
I feel like I'm so sane, it's almost a competitive advantage in my industry. I'm serious. I'm not joking.
Yeah.
I mean, really, it's like, and a huge part of that is the spirituality of the 12 steps, compounded by, faith in Jesus Christ and solid church attendance and reading the Bible and doing all the things that good Christians are meant to do. And what I think that's done more than anything else is that's really grounded me in reality, so that we can tick these boxes very quickly, so that when it comes to gender, it's man and a woman, right? Anything else is just pure nonsense. There's no such thing as trans. There's transvestites. Gender is the same as sex, which is binary. Transcendence. It's like talking to my trainer. I said, listen, it's only over the last 150 years that people have, for a nanosecond, thought it was okay to be an atheist, to accept the idea that something came from nothing. Now, in no other context is that possible, where something can come from nothing.
Yeah.
Right? It's just not possible. But according to them, everything did.
Yeah.
So, eschatology informs attitude. And what we're seeing a reduction in the belief in God. Okay. I'm not even talking about the Christian God here. It's like we're looking at a generation, a culture that's informed by it, that is characteristically atheist.
Yeah.
Communism, I put that in there. It's like, it's remarkable that sort of like communism has gone mainstream, right? I would hope that if I walked around with a swastika or some salutary text on my T-shirt over the face of Adolf Hitler, then someone would say something.
Yeah.
Right? But you could walk around with Che Guevara, Chairman Mao, Stalin. It's all sort of great.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, if that's not a marker for complete insanity, then tell me what is.
Yeah.
Morality, we don't even listen. I was having this conversation with someone I know quite well, and funnily enough, it was around drinking and using coke, and he'd had a problem with it before, and he called me up, and I said, mate, I don't think you're an alcoholic. I just think you like having a good time. I mean, who doesn't?
Yeah.
So you need to look at what's happening in your life and what you're avoiding and fix that. And I think, I don't think you'll have a problem. And pretty much that's what happened.
Yeah.
And then he went back to, and then his therapist tried to tell him that he was an addict or an alcoholic.
Yeah.
And he was saying, you know, we got into this conversation about how we mitigate. I go, listen, he's Catholic. I said, what you're doing is a sin. Okay, you're not supposed to be getting drunk, and you're definitely not supposed to be using coke. It's just, and it's like the penny dropped. It's like, don't do it. God doesn't like it.
Yeah.
But that kind of, this is a really smart guy.
Yeah.
And it's like we've lost this, and we've lost a moral vocabulary.
Yeah.
Ironically enough, is the last one is addiction. It's like one of the best things is I know I'm an addict. I know I have a predilection for doing too much of stuff that, that doesn't help me in the long term.
Yeah.
But trust me, mate, it's like, you know, almost everyone is to some extent. And, you know, some of it, you know, some of it works out quite well.
Yeah.
But it's just this, you know, I'll wrap up with this, and then I'll be interested to hear what you say, and then we can go back to it again. I heard this great, I'm sure I've told you this, I heard this great thing in a meeting a few weeks ago. This woman said, most people don't know why they do the things they do.
Yeah.
And I was like, hallelujah, praise, that's absolutely true. And so when it comes back to this sanity, that's pretty much what you know, sort of founders and CEOs and you know, C-suite people in tech, I sort of sit down and get back to, why are you doing what are you doing?
Yeah.
Right? It's never about the money. There's something behind that, and there's always something behind that. And it's like everyone since COVID just seems to have been sucked into this huge materialistic consumerist bubble, and they're like, their brains have been sucked out, but apart from the one residual piece of sanity where somehow they know that even this isn't right.
Yeah.
They're nihilists without believing in true nihilism. And that's why that's why we're just seeing so much of what we're seeing is just bad mental health.
Yeah.
You know, this evening I'll be going to my church, and they'll be doing a deliverance ceremony, which they rebrand very cleverly, I think, as spiritual cleansing, getting rid of negative energy.
Yeah.
Because if they talked about chasing out demons, then, you know, people would freak out. But that's what's happening. And as I think it might have been you said it, you know, Jesus had this one amazing catch-all phrase for all of this. He called out to the brokenhearted. And whether if someone's suffering from alcoholism, if they're in an abusive relationship, if their child died, if they're schizophrenic, they all fall into the category of the brokenhearted.
Yeah.
And people are brokenhearted because they don't have access to God in their life. And I think any survey will show you that religious people are score significantly higher on all mental health metrics than, you know, the non-religious. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting about you and I is that we're both pretty passionate to the point of being quite obsessive, and we've tried pretty much everything to fix every problem, and we push the boundaries. So, and it's interesting, you know, that we've converged on a similar sort of point. And I think this issue of people trying to reinvent themselves with this bizarre ideology, which, as you said, is normalizing things which are just should not be normalized, like the far left, which killed far more people. You know, people like Lenin and the ethos of Marx has killed far more people last century. In fact, double of what Hitler and that ideology. And so your analogy of, you know, people walking around with a swastika on their heads versus a Che Guevara cool T-shirt is just absurd. And I think actually this comes down to what you're saying. People do not know why they do what they do, as well as you know, not being completely unaware of what's right or wrong. And I think that's one of the main things that concerns me when we have discussions, when we step out into the outside world in a business context. You know, how do we rationalize what is right or wrong? If it's just your view versus my view, it's just obviously going to go nowhere. So and I think for me, actually one guy, what I was going to contribute was actually from Andrew Tate. And I think I think he's right. I think what he says is actually the rich aren't squabbling about this stuff at all, Paul, at the moment. What they're doing, and actually this whole structure that you've just described around identity politics, as well as one of the things I've come across in particular, which is the intersectionality, which is the basic ethos of woke ideology, that every has a victim and an oppressor. So even if there isn't one, you can create one and you can change the dialogue. And that is the stuff of neo-Marxism. That's the stuff of warfare.
Yes.
And it's and that's the sort of essence of the the mind virus, which is just tragic. And you mentioned the word mental health. I mean, is it any wonder that people are struggling, from a mental health perspective? And I think as well, I'm quite pleased in some ways that this is beginning to unravel, because Jesus said, bring it into the light. And guess what's happened to crypto? We've got we've got a Tower of Babel situation. And the thing about a Tower of Babel situation, despite the fact the dialogue continues, it will come back, blah, 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 whatever, the echo chambers echoing. Actually, in the Tower of Babel, the unique thing is when spiritually things walk out of line, they collapse and there's nothing left. So if you take the collapse of FTX, there is nothing left. And I think I've got a list of other, I'm an enterprise thinker, so I don't really stick to 5 things, so I'm going to break my own rule. But some of the other things I specifically are the collapse of Wasps Rugby Club, full of hubris and incompetence. I've business in my turnaround world, businesses needing funding and no help. So they're asking for funding, but they don't want any help. And the consequences of that, they're going to lose everything.
Right.
I think, we've got this situation with footballers taking the knee, this one love, falling into this neo-Marxist perspective at England level. So that's, tarnishing us all.
Absolutely.
We've got this mad thing
they
about.
They cared that much about it. They'd copy yellow cards.
What was that, Paul?
They actually cared about it. They'd pay the fine and copy yellow cards.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. I mean, that's the whole point. They don't action this stuff. Absolutely. It's all virtue signaling with action. And I think we've got this Web3 thing. And again, the psychology, you talked about the psychology, the underlying psychology of technology. I wrote a book on that and the pathology of it. And when you look at the Web3 thing, it's just the same as crypto. It's based on the notion of decentralization, when in fact it's the most totally centralized tyranny that will know everything about everything. And I think tech investors investing in FTX and things like that, which is what's bad about that. You talked about people not knowing what they're what's driving them, but also in this process, people are destroying their integrity. So investors typically are fairly rigorous, but drip, taking the wrong actions, not doing due diligence, that's a very slippery slope. And these are substantial investors who are
but okay, mimetic desire is what I'd say to that. It's like, you can cast a spell across a market.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely sick. Absolutely right.
Yeah.
We've got COP27 as well, which is just selfishness, and they've made some token payments which are virtue signaling, negligible. There's no prevention. There's no, and it's just a shamble. The tragedy with this, I think, is that with all this stuff going on, you've got the engagement between Trudeau and President Xi, and look who's coming out on top and looking appealing. So we have to be very careful. And I don't think people have realized how far they have walked off the path of normality and sanity. For Xi to start looking appealing is some sort of achievement that. And I think just coming back to some of the, what's the solution to this? I think for me, it's about rebuilding what I describe as being productive businesses. And I've had a few engagements, and I know the investment community really well, and this concerns me, where they're investing in parasitic tech businesses and not, which is starving the productive economy of cash. So not only are we have got these weird actions going on and weird businesses cropping up, tech businesses, is actually starving the productive economy of cash, which is terrible. And to top it all, when you raise a concern, you get accused, around, let's say the the footballers taking the knee or the one love thing, you get hit with hate speech, and actually, exactly who is being hateful here?
Yeah, absolutely.
That is so bizarre. And actually, coming back to what you're saying, what I think the crux of this is, what do you love? Because I do believe we are love machines. I think a lot of our behaviors, in terms of what we search at as men, if we don't have God in our lives, if we're passionate people, certainly destroy us. And I think what's awful about the neo-Marxism, it plays to a lot of very emotive subjects like race, like sexuality, and this victimhood mentality is not something I'm ever going to slip into, because I'm on guard. But it's a very tempting ideology. But it's also, oddly enough, the reason why it interests me so much is because I've noticed it's exactly the same psychology that causes a business to collapse. So you were saying that businesses do not know why they do what they do, but actually they don't either know why their businesses are failing either.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think we really are in a difficult situation.
But not knowing why your business is failing, that kind of makes sense. That's that's not too much of a stretch. But not knowing why you're doing what you're doing in the first place kind of is. That's under the radar.
Exactly, yeah. And I think this has gone on. What's interesting for me, from a turnaround perspective, and it is actually, because I check everything. I'm not a Christian from a sort of wet sort of ideological perspective. It just works, and I think you've found the same thing.
Yeah.
The analogy I find is that the Tower of Babel is exactly what we're facing.
Yeah.
And the unique thing about the Tower of Babel is that Jesus will give you enough rope to hang yourself, and then he'll say, then the whole thing, if it doesn't have a moral backbone, will completely collapse. Now, what I'm seeing, Paul, and the other thing Jesus said was, bring things into the light in order to resolve.
Amen.
Now, what I'm seeing in terms of what's coming into the light in my world, which is the turnaround world, which is the Tower of Babel type scenario, is tragically, and this is really, really terrible, that a lot of the businesses I'm coming across, the directors, there's no funds in the business. So if the business needs shutting down, which it does, to remove the liability from the directors directly, well, they have to go to the law, which nothing protects them from that. But even they haven't broken the law, then they're having to pay the insolvency practitioners' fees themselves, because there's no assets left in the business at all, Paul. And normally the crux of turnaround over the last few years, there's normally some assets that you can restructure it and restart the business. So that is truly the outcome of the Tower of Babylon. And I'm not saying from a perspective of, as I say, some sort of flimmy, wet, church-going Christian, because I certainly am not. Although I am a church-going Christian, I'm just saying it from a general sanity perspective. And where does the sanity come from? Because I'm firmly of the view we can't resolve any of this stuff. We can't resolve ethics. We can't sacrifice. We can't forgive. We can't repent. We can't acknowledge what we've done wrong, because the alternative is pride. And pride.
Yeah, absolutely. And pride is, before I forget, I mean, pride has crept into this culture, because ultimately, if you don't have God, then who's the authority of your life? It's you.
Yeah.
And so it's like, so you're your God.
Yeah.
That's why people can say my truth. It's like, I get to make the truth. It's like, no, you don't.
Yeah.
It's called being delusional. It's your opinion or your perspective. It's not your truth. Yeah. And the curious thing is, and I really urge you to read this excellent book by Natasha Crane called Faithfully Different. And she talks about the fact that in secular society, you see patterns. When people do this, when they reject God, the God of the Bible, and his authority, and they become authorities themselves, then society lives by 4 rules. Yeah. Okay, where the ultimate guide is always feelings. It's how I feel.
Yeah.
The ultimate sin is judgment. You can't judge me.
Yeah. Yeah.
The ultimate guess is God, right? It might be this God, it might be that God. And so what is it? It's feelings. And the ultimate goal is always happiness. What makes me feel good?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so and curiously enough, and this is what really caused my head to explode. And she said, when you've got a bunch of people believing that, what you'll find is that in a collective, they always will defer to the majority group opinion, which explains that woke herd mentality.
Yeah.
People just being in lockstep. Because ultimately they know if they're the authority of their own life, they know in their heart of hearts that it's bullshit.
Yeah.
And so they kind of just go with everyone else because there's security in numbers.
Yeah. I think the other thing, Paul, is I've noticed, and this worries me. I've noticed in businesses broadly that there's very few people like me, thank goodness. I'm a specific course for a specific course who can steer businesses through the most ridiculous, crises. So I'm very rare, my bullshit radar is very acute and sensitive. And I've developed this psychology thing and various other things to try and check what makes sense and what doesn't, frankly. But I think what I've learned, to add to what you've just said, is that people, Paul, will, well, one, they'll go along with anything, but actually, two, right, people will believe anything, okay? And I mean the word believe. So people will believe, for example, that crypto is a good idea. And people still do believe that crypto is a good idea, Paul. Now, or people will believe that neo-Marxism or woke is a good idea. And I've got, with my newsletter I send out, I regularly have dialogue with people that say, all woke is pointing out things that need to be fixed. It's this, because that's actually the technical definition of woke, but people do not see the corruption and the underlying psychology. So people are believing things which are patently untrue. Now, if you believe things that are patently untrue, you have a psychological necessity to act in the same way, Paul, right?
Yeah.
Therefore, you've got this dialogue. It's actually steering the ship, and it's very possible for people to believe untruths. In fact, I was just talking with a group of people this morning about the Wasps rugby club collapse.
So I don't know anything about that. Tell me what happened.
Well,
what's the
pretty
story?
much. Well, just a whole raft of sort of egotistical stuff, really. But basically, the rugby club was losing a lot of money, 5 to 10 million quid pre-COVID. Went into COVID, expanded, took on 48 million quid's worth of debt, and hey presto, it went bust. And now, but there's a whole raft of. I mean, that sounds pretty ridiculous, but actually, that board thought they were doing the right thing, Paul, and they didn't realise what was driving them and the utter insanity of that. And the part that's interesting and relevant spiritually is what's the core business, because that's actually what they should have focused on. So rugby club is basically something along the lines of winning rugby games, training teams, creating an engine to maintain your capability and not lose money, or ideally make money. But the eye got completely taken off the ball as regards to that. They took on a huge amount of debt. They expanded into a stadium they couldn't afford. They moved town, away from their loyal follower base, and that, just ridiculous on many, many fronts. But I think it sounds ridiculous, Paul, but actually drip, 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 drip. This is what we are facing now. So if you look at, frankly, what's happened over the last 40 years, which is around growth and domination, which is absolutely, bloody pride centric. There's a real cost. And guess what? We're trashing the planet. Guess what? We're consuming too much. Guess what? We've lost our moral compass. So it's not surprising, having done and believed things and you can still see growth. Growth has been the mantra in the UK government. Everybody's talking about growth in the economy, and yet it's at the root cause of it's at the root cause of the why we're consuming too much. It's at the root cause of more. It's the antithesis of happiness. I mean, that actually started in the 1970s. Oddly enough, people assume that the world has always wanted more. It's always been the route to happiness. That was the notion that was introduced in the 1970s.
Yeah.
And that's actually become now part of the fabric of society. And people have believed that untruth, that growth is growth is a generalization, but growth in material goods is not the route to happiness. Well, happiness is a dodgy word anyway. I mean, joy, I think, is a better one, but happiness assumes that your environment is going to is actually around happenings. That's the basis of happiness. But of course, we have no control over our environment. So the notion of that we can control our happenings is the ultimate in pride and insanity. So
yeah,
so I think we've got a really hideous, like Wasps Rugby Club, we've got a hideous wake-up call. It's like going back to your analogy of your background of addiction. The question is, what are we addicted to? Because we're all addicted to something. And actually,
if you want me, unless that was a rhetorical question, I would say what we're addicted to is self.
Yeah, can be. Yeah,
as a society.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And we think we can fix our own problems, and it's like, no,
I agree. Just absurd. Yeah, we're hugely reliant on each other as well, and challenging our thinking like this and developing relationships like this to dislodge our own rubbish in our heads, because Jordan Peterson says that most of the thoughts that come directly into our heads are false, and so if they're unchallenged, they become true. They become facts in our own mind. So it's so important that we do
outsource our sanity.
Yeah, challenge our sanity, and that comes back to what you were saying. Tom is a beautiful young lady. Absolutely absurd, and the reason why that's absolutely absurd is, and it might be true in my own head, but actually it's utterly absurd because it doesn't pass contact with the enemies. Because I would hope, Paul, if I told you I was a beautiful young lady, you'd say, "Look, you effing idiot, that's just nonsense."
Yeah.
Or something maybe a bit more polite. But either way, we've got to have that integrity between us to challenge each other, because that's what maintains our sanity.
Hallelujah. Did you watch 11 Steps to Change the World?
No, I didn't see that. What was that?
That's the Doug Wilson's documentary. It's streaming now for free on Canon Plus. It's excellent.
Yeah, no, I didn't see that. I saw. Well, you sent me a link, but I couldn't see the follow-up thing.
No, just you go on the link and then